Snow. All right, so it's 7:02. I'll call the meeting to order. What is it, December 18th, school building committee for the town of Milton. Typically for this, we just do a typical roll call, so I'll just call you out. Scott Tereshek, present. Mike Zulis. Yeah. Terry Hurley.
Here.
Glenn Hoffman.
Yeah.
And Sean O'Rourke here. Also with us tonight, we're joining our OPMs, Sean Burke and Seamus. I got to get your last name.
Seamus O'Connor.
O'Connor. Got it. Not O'Rourke from this one.
From the interview. Yeah. And there's different marks on
oh, that's right. And Mark Loring.
Thanks.
Sorry about that, sir. And then also with us, the facilities director for the town, Mr. Chris Hayden. So that kind of kicks us off. Second thing on the agenda, we reserve the first 15 minutes of every meeting to have a citizen speak. So at this point in the meeting, we ask if you are here to speak, please say your name and your address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. So leave it with that. We'll start with anybody in the room if you're here for citizen speak.
Sure.
Timothy, how are you?
Where would you have me?
Right here.
Right here. I can. Or right here is fine, right?
That's fine.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all very much. Good evening. Good evening. Hope everybody's doing well. Belated happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas to everybody. Just wanted to touch base. After the November 13th meeting in my travels, of course, I had my own meetings that night. I was had a couple of constituents call and mention certain things to me from the November 13th meeting. So I just thought it'd be helpful if I jumped in with you tonight. And briefly, of course, I know you have a lot of serious things to take up. But a couple of things that I think will go more smoothly going forward. It was said at the last meeting about the rough draft that I received on October 5th on a Thursday night. I believe it was completed on August 6th, 8/6. I actually received it on Thursday night, the 5th. And right away, of course, I dutifully the next day forwarded it to Senate Council. They came back, of course, with the red lines and different suggestions, in which case we forwarded right away to the committee. It was said, and I just want to clear this up, that we can only take up these articles of legislation, these home rule petitions, in December and July. And actually, that's incorrect.
Yeah.
We can take this up at any time during the calendar year.
Awesome.
Anytime at all. And it was also said various subcommittees. Of course, the bill would have to traverse subcommittees to get to the certain process. So for those reasons, we couldn't get it done in December. We actually don't have subcommittees in the legislative process. We have joint committees. Now, there is a 15-step process. On October 17th, I directed my chief of staff to send a memo to Town Administrator Milano, which he did, which I have copies of, which I'll leave here for the record. It outlines essentially what is a 15-step legislative process between both the House and the Senate. We can take up any type of legislation at any time during the calendar year. Does not matter as to what the month is. There is no month dedicated to any one month or any one topic. Also, it was also said that pretty much it's now between town council and myself. And obviously, I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you. Until I receive a certified copy, or we've yet to receive a certified copy, legislatively, legally, and officially, our hands are tied. And when I say our hands, I refer to the Milton legislative delegation, Representative Driscoll, Representative Luca Oakley, and myself. As soon as we receive a certified copy of myself, right away, what we'll do is we'll forward it to Senate Council. If it happens to be myself, only myself as a member of the Senate can interact with Senate Council. And obviously, I'm more than happy for any constituent from my district to bring the talent to Senate Council to be on any issue, on any challenge, and any question. At which point, it will be what's called a late file. You know, we embark upon 2-year sessions, and I know you're all aware of that. In January of the odd year, in this case 2023, we were sworn in on the first Wednesday after the first Monday, and believe it or not, that's how it's written in the Constitution. In February, we would call what we have called bill filing. If a bill is filed after that, it's a late file.
Yep.
And the first step, of course, is myself or any member of the Milton delegation filing the legislation. We have to get concurrence from the House Rules Committee in this chair and the Senate Rules Committee in this chair. I don't expect that will be a problem. At which point the Senate clerk, the House clerk, and the Senate President's office and the Speaker's office will direct it to a joint standing committee. And of course, I sent that email out, directed my chief of staff on October 17th. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll leave that here for the record, several copies of it. It's been now 7 months since May 8th, and I know you're all well aware of that. It's highly unusual for a home rule petition not to have made its way to the legislature after 7 months. So I know there's some outstanding issues. I presume that there are, given that I haven't received them yet. And I've also been told, and what I've listened to, I reviewed the tapes, that July is, next July, you would hope it would be done by then. In order for it to be done by July, I need that home rule petition certified, a certified copy, or could go to Representative Driscoll or Representative Fluker Oakley, but time is definitely of the essence if we're looking at July is what the target is. So if there are any outstanding issues you'd like to talk to me or inform me about, please feel free to do so now or at a later time. But 7 months is definitely a long lapse of time in between an actual vote at town meeting and have it still not have made its way to the legislature. And of course, we see the rough draft, and I was more than happy to bring that to Senate Council and bring their talents to bear. But rough draft doesn't do anything for us in terms of the official process and our legal abilities to bring it forward. And Senate Council will not start working on anything until they see a certified copy. At my request, they're more than happy to advise and consult, but there will be no actual earnest work. Once we receive it, though, Senate Council and the various committees that this bill will traverse its way through will also engage EOEA and various relevant state agencies. The legislature, of course, does its own process as well. So I just figured it'd be helpful to jump in here today and pass along a few bits of information.
Appreciate it.
Clear up a few things. And obviously, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, just information for you. The components of the deliverable, as we understand it, that has to accompany the special legislation, namely the appraisals and the alternative analysis, will be done probably by next week.
Okay.
So after that, we should have basically the components necessary to set that up. So that's the goal.
And as I said, once we receive a certified copy, it can be filed at any time.
Excellent.
It's not confined to any time period on the calendar. Any weekdays. And this session will last until January of 2025. We meet by constitution minimum every 72 hours. And obviously there are a lot of committee hearings and sessions in between. So whenever it's ready to go, please forward it to myself or Representative Driscoll or Representative Fluker Oakley. And if it happens to be myself, I will file it. And of course, I will invite my partners in the House of Reps to sign on as co-sponsors.
Excellent. And
we'll, of course, inform the town and all relevant parties when there is a hearing. Every bill receives a hearing. And that's about it for tonight. I know I'm interrupting what you have on your busy agenda, but I think
that information is welcome.
I thank you all for the time. I just thought going forward and we'll smooth things over just to let you all know that this can be taken up at any time. It's not confined to any 1 month.
No.
Yeah, but we do need the certified copy. That's important for us to be able to start the process. It is a process, and I often say it's much like baseball. It's not an exact science, but it is a process that takes, in many cases, several months. I've seen home rule petitions take about a year, and most home rule petitions do make it across the goal line and get to the governor. Not all, but obviously as a member of the Milton legislative delegation, it's my job to shepherd any and all home rule petitions. But I thought it was very important that you folks are aware of that, and you folks very kindly volunteer your time for aware of it. But I thank you all very, very much, and I hope you have a great Christmas.
Yeah, yes, Senator, just in terms of timing, my understanding is town council has been bringing this forward, and they were waiting for feedback from EOEA.
Okay.
They have that. My understanding is that it's ready to go.
Yeah,
They were going to be in touch with your office, so that could be imminent.
Okay.
Because they did get feedback from EOA. They did make some revisions based on what EOEA suggested. And so the last I heard was that they're ready to go. So hopefully that, as I said, town council has kind of taken this, and hopefully they'll be forwarding that to you. Okay. Within that, I think within the next few days.
Yeah. So I have a standing bi-weekly call with town council to go over this. Or it actually landed today. So the draft legislation received the red lines from Senate Council. Also,
Received them for myself.
oh, yourself, I apologize. Okay. And then also from EEA. So we took the combination of those, consolidated it down, and have that kind of finalized. In addition to that, as I mentioned, the appraisals that we do as part of the EEA's requirements, and also the alternative analysis, which I drafted. Or essentially, we're voting on the alternative analysis tonight. And then the appraisals, there were some minor comments. We're asking them to wrap up by next week.
Okay. In terms of timelines, when it comes to the legislature, there are no guaranteed timelines. You know, there are senior members of the state Senate right now who have Article 97s that are, you know, they're chomping at the bit and they're working diligently to secure their passage. But as I said, it's inexact science.
Mm-hmm.
So the process does take many months, and obviously for the certified copy, the sooner would be the optimum situation. So, but I also know you folks are working hard, and I thank you for the opportunity. I will leave those copies behind that I sent by my direction. My chief of staff said to Town Administrator Milano on October 17th, which outlines the process. And I thank you all for your time, and I hope everybody has a great Christmas and a happy New Year.
You do.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Take care.
Right. Hey, next, I don't see any other public here. So anybody online that has for citizen speak,
There's people online, but no one has their hand up. And
just give it a minute.
all right.
Not seeing any. All right, perfect. Move on to agenda item number 3, which is approval of our previous minutes. I don't believe those got issued, so we'll have to table that to our next meeting. You're welcome. Hey, Tim, grab a seat. Welcome. So agenda item number 4 for old business, and 4A, essentially the timeline. So Sean, I'll turn it over to you if you kind of want to walk through what you've got already. So because we don't have a projecting TV tonight, if you log into the Zoom, you'll be able to see it through.
All right, so let me share this so people can see it. All right. So what we want to talk about as part of the timeline is just the educational program update for the district. Just a reminder that we did send out some draft copies, and just something that the school committee should be aware that exists. The architect that is hired is going to help you through this process, but trying to figure out who's going to be involved in that process and drafting the ed plan, and trying to look at some of the examples that we provided to get their head around what is going to be expected of them would be a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Mark has his hand up, so Sean, through you can.
Yeah, if we recognize them.
Sorry, just on that point, appreciate the documents that have been shared. They've been passed over to the superintendent, and they are we've been reviewing them, and the superintendent has been working with his internal team to identify folks to be a part of kind of those reviews and begin that process based upon some of the draft plans you've shared, Sean. So thank you for that.
That's great. If you have that team already developed, it'll just save a lot of time. So that's excellent. Good to hear. His RFS was available on December 5th. We did a second walkthrough on the 13th. Our question deadline is set for the 20th. Sometimes those end up getting extended. If you have a really good question that you want to answer, you are welcome to, but as part of RFS, it's the 20th is the cutoff date, and we strive to have all questions answered by the 29th. So far, we've received very few questions. There's a couple on the timeline which we're going to talk about tonight, and that people had at the walkthrough. But other than that, it seems pretty straightforward. People understand the project, and they're just working on getting their presented their proposals together. Our application deadline is on the 12th. We expect them all to receive on the 12th. And design selection meeting is what we want to talk about too. So we get these, we're going to get the RFPs from the people proposing on the project on the 12th, and we have a meeting, our first meeting set on the 15th, which is the 12th is a Friday, the 15th is the following Monday. to try to go through and set up a short list. And Sean and I talked earlier whether or not that's too quick, and it may be too quick, but I think it might make sense to have that meeting anyway. Even if we spend a lot of time sitting together and reviewing those, if you get them on a Friday and then you say, all right, it's going to be a week from Monday, do you look at them all week long, or do you kind of look at them on the weekend before the Monday meeting? So we much prefer start that Monday if we can have a meeting. If people need more time, we can certainly have another meeting, but there could be questions. There could be trying to get people to understand what they're supposed to be looking at and making sure everyone's on the same page. So I think there's a lot of value in having that meeting.
So just to be clear, that meeting is for the subcommittee that's making the shortlist selection, not the entire school.
It's going to be set up because you're going to pick a subcommittee of the members of the school committee and members of the school district.
Yep.
They're going to make the shortlist determination. So that would be a meeting for them, and the full committee would not need to be in that one. We have it set for January 29th, if that timeline works, to have interviews the week of the 29th. So shortlist, usually we look for 3. Some people do 4 or 5. It tends to get a little bit long if you someone get to interview 5 people for the job. So we do think that 3 is probably better. It's a good number. Try to hone in on those 3 top firms that you really want to interview. That's notice of intent and try to get contract negotiations done and get someone under contract and get going with the project. So just so people, we had 52 current plan holders, 52 people have requested. Out of that, 36 are core architectural firms, 14 are specialty firms like geotech or NEP or landscape. We do one firm that's a data analytics. They pull every RFP and they sell this details all the RFPs that are listed. And then one GCCM firm has pulled it. So the architects are architects that we're familiar with. A lot of them we worked with before. A lot of them are heavy into the MSBA school in Massachusetts. So those names that have pulled us, it's names that we would hope to see and that we'd expect to see. So it's a good list, and there's a lot of people interested in the project, which I think is great. We had 12 design firms show up at the walkthrough, which is also great. The town administrator met us there. We were there for about a half an hour. The PM one is very similar to that. Not a lot to see, looking at the trees, but just going through the process, going through the, just trying to lay out what the job is.
Who here attended that?
Sean.
And Nick was there as well.
Okay.
Nick Milano.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the process, for the short list later on, but, essentially for the timeline that Sean laid out, just seeing if anybody has comments or questions or anything like that.
Are we going to distribute a list of the firms that went to the site visit?
Yep.
All the documentation, I can resend it out. There's a link for a file share with the RFS. All firms who pulled the drawings are on there. We issued addenda 1, which is everybody who signed in at the walkthrough, so all that's available. And all the firms know who else was there. We provided that whole sign-in list. And
So the sign-in list, what it did is, if I understand you guys correctly, whoever pulled the RFS off, you created the list from that, and then whoever showed up physically signed.
some people signed
In addition.
to that, but yes, so that list that we sent out will include anyone who's pulled the drawings plus anyone who showed up at the walkthrough.
Yeah.
It's the same firms, it just might have been a different person, so they signed in separately.
Yeah, got it. Any other questions?
Just that
Yep.
January 15th is Martin Luther King Day.
My calendar didn't tell that. Okay, so
My husband's birthday. No, it's all day.
I'll find a time if that doesn't work for the sub. I don't even know. Can you have a subcommittee meeting on a public holiday? Okay. No. So we'll have to find a time with that subcommittee. And it'll be, I guess, around that date. So we'll let the design firms know that it'll be a couple, probably either the Tuesday or the Wednesday if people are available.
Okay.
It makes sense to have some communication with that group prior to that if they want. We don't have the screen, but we have a procedure of how we go through designer selection. We have an overall comparison matrix that we'll send out. We have a listing of what's important to what's important to different people on the committee, and try to list everything that we can think of. The design selection criteria that the town has voted and approved does have some sort of, it has a couple items of criteria, but and on top of that, it says, and then basically any of the criteria that the selection committee feels that it's important, put that on there as well. So, it's experience, active projects, 149 experience, the whole kind of laundry list of stuff you'd see over and over again, which we would present to that committee, but the other items that group would like to include as well. And so then we'll have everyone have a sheet that you do design a selection. You can we don't typically rank by numbers because the MSBA doesn't allow that, but we can certainly do it here because it's non-MSBA. But we'll do, preferable, middle of the road, and then disadvantageous, and then try to add up how many wins the most and see if there's any consensus there, and then further conversation from there.
Yeah, so I think, Chris, for you, I'm not sure if you're going in place of Peter Burrows or not, but the list I got from Charlene was Peter Burrows, John Redden, Bernadette Butler, and other. Apologize, I don't have my but based on that, I know there was a lot of questions of what's the process, how we do it. So we'll talk about it a little bit tonight, but what we'll do is, when we talk about agenda item, we're talking about architectural selection services. We'll dive into it a little bit more and then finalize it. That's cool. Cool.
So that's a basic timeline. Then we should talk to them, define what that subcommittee is, and make sure we have communication. And maybe before the interviews come in, it would make sense to have a meeting, even if it's a Zoom and online, just to understand what they're going to get prior to the package coming out. Because if there's any changes you want to make once you receive them, that's it. There's no opportunity to change the rules.
Yep. Yeah, and we'll talk. We voted on the formation of that committee of how it be comprised, I think, 2 meetings ago. So, and just review that when we get to it. But in regards to timeline or anything else, any comments, questions?
So the overall timeline that we're looking at, and it's just based on what our standard feasibility study for an MSBA project would be 8 to 9 months. So having it starting in February, you could probably get your feasibility done in July, and then schematic design portion of that you could get done probably in October. And the question is, how does that tie out against town meeting and the November election? Because I believe there was, a desire to maybe hit the November election for the overall override vote.
Yep.
So understanding when the warrant needs to be put in place, if town meeting needs to approve the ballot, the question, things like that. What is the timing of that, and how do we, just to make sure we incorporate that correctly with the designers there.
Yeah, so that one typically, and correct me if I go wrong on anything here, Mike, but if we're doing a special town meeting, typically for the warrant to migrate its way through the warrant committee and stuff like that, we typically want an article a couple months ahead, right, to have that there. So what I think the need or the ask is going to be at that time is, the article, I think, the text of the article we can work on. I think the hardest number is going to be what that number is. The hardest thing is going to be what that number is going to be, or what the ask for. The language of the article we all know would be for the construction of the school. Right. What the number needs to be, I think, is one of the things we need to start working on once we onboard an architect. When would they feel comfortable? Or do you guys feel comfortable with their progress to start putting numbers to it?
It sometimes depends for school projects. It depends on where the project layout. Sometimes they'll do it after feasibility study that people feel very comfortable, and sometimes it's after schematic design. And it just depends how much contingency you want to put in there and how many unknowns you have at that point. Yep. I think you're working with the designers and making sure that they're comfortable with it as well, because we do not want to go in for a vote if we're not confident that the amount of money that you're requesting is the appropriate for the project, and going back is not. We don't want to do that. Yeah. We want to just overestimate. We want to be right. We want to have an appropriate budget for the project that we're trying to do. And I think by midsummer we probably have a good number, and then we'll just have to get the comfort level of is it good enough to go forward with the vote, or do we hold off? Yep. Things we're going to have to think about as we go through this process and as we start negotiating the contracts with the architects is your budget for them is about 50% of the full feasibility and schematic design, not a little better than that. So we'll have to figure out how their process lays out and whether or not sometime in between now and that next phase, you want to get some more money to kind of have them go beyond the feasibility into schematic design.
Yep.
And the question is, how far do you want to go down that road before you have the article, before you have the land, right? And before that's approved. So it's a decision the committee's going to, talk to the architect about. But if you're comfortable moving forward, that's great. If you don't get the land, then moving into the next phase and spending the money to further designs on land that isn't owned may not be the desire of the committee. So it's something you have to think about.
Yep. And the 50% number you were quoting there for funding is feasibility and schematic.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yeah.
all the numbers that we put forward up to this point for additional funding is only for feasibility, not for the schematic design. Okay. And the schematic design takes us to roughly what percentage? Like if you're talking design deliverables or something like that.
Probably 30%.
Okay.
You'll have, at that point, you'll have a pretty good layout of the building, maybe rooms and things like that. But then you start getting into the details of finishes and how windows work and things like that. You get square footage, you'll have layout, you'll have adjacencies. It'll be a decent project, but you can't build up there. It's
No. And not just for myself, but putting the number on it.
Some folks are coming in because you have basically one location and you have an idea of what you want to do. And obviously you need to talk to the design team and make sure to see if they have any goods out of that. MSBA project, typically you look at a bunch of different projects, add renos and things like that. If that's off the table, then they could probably go a little bit further in the feasibility and the schematic design earlier. And then it's just a matter of budget, because they're going to put, if you want to go faster, they're going to put tons more hours into it and get you there. And they can certainly do that because they don't have to do all the studying of different plots and different options, because you've already done that.
Yep.
You can send the 5 years of research and study that you've done as this committee and prove to them that that's the spot, right?
We're going to talk about that on the land swap.
Right.
All right. Any other comments, questions, or anything? All right. If not,
Is that the schedule that you just showed? Is that what you outlined to the architectural bidders?
Looking at the RFP, there's probably more time in there than there is here. So we're going to we'll issue an addendum to them just to take a portion that is a pretty large portion of time to review all the different options they have and then tell them this is the one we want to go with. I think that goes away and then it becomes an option that looks more like this.
Okay.
If we are able to advance to a higher level of design by that October timeframe, the language for the article has already been submitted at that time. But we will, is my understanding correct, that we'll still have an opportunity to amend that language as we were able to take that design and understand the dollars behind it more, because we'll be able to, remove some doubt that's baked into the contingency dollars, but probably insert funds as we further understand the scope at that point.
yeah. So you're talking about it, so essentially the money that we have appropriated right now takes us a little bit past the feasibility study and into schematic design. I think that's a safe way of saying it.
And I guess in an ideal scenario, we would be able to secure some additional funding to advance the design beyond that ahead of the time of the
So to do that, are you basically asking of
May dollars?
So May dollars. Yeah. I mean, for us, the intent was to just make the ask to get us to the fall. That's essentially what we're doing with the funding article. The next on the agenda. Supplemental funding in May is kind of the will of this committee. I think we need to look at it and, as we onboard an architect, really figure out what they can do with the funding that we have allocated for them and see where it gets us. And if that gets us to a point that we think we'll have a hard enough number that we can put dollars to it to go for the full funding in the fall. I think that's 2 meetings ago, kind of where we're heading as a committee. That's the type of work I want all of us to start, over the next couple months, really dive into and start thinking about for that. So the question is, if the question is, could we ask for more money in May? Yes. We'd have to put an article together, probably February, to figure out what that number should be and then present it. And I'm just going through the typical timeline for a May town meeting. You have to get an article. It has to migrate through, the committees, basically, for the select board and then through the warrant committee. And then we'd have to get ready for May for a presentation and an ask. following up an ask that we just did. So I'm not sure. But yes, we could.
I think the point of once the architect gets on board, figure out what their schedule is and where their phase ends, inform whether or not it makes sense. Hit the ground running, and they with a certain amount, we can get a schematic design before the time. That's going to give you better. It's going to give you a better estimate. It's going to give you more like a surety that the money you're asking for is the correct amount of money. And so it may make sense to do that. But I think on board in February, that's maybe one of the first conversations you have is about schedule. We're going to be at what date, and let's backtrack from that November election to make sure that we can support a number and actually say the warrant article that you put forth is a valid number.
Yep. Any other questions regarding
Understanding it in both situations, we're probably drafting an article without a number in it. Or, like if we have to start drafting a number in February for May, realistically, I don't think we'd be there till the end of February with the architects. They're brought on board in early February. It'll take us that month for them to figure out what we already know and what they don't have to do, and how we can shorten timelines and adjust the costs. So we might have to draft and submit and plug numbers as we go.
basically a placeholder?
Right.
Mhm.
Same thing might happen with November,
Mhm.
which I think that happens all the time, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are times when we have an idea about direction and trying to get the process moving and get things through the warrant committee and then make sure you have the number finalized before they do the final review. I think that happens.
I think it would be difficult to go in front of the warrant committee without a number, just, leaving it blank. So, the quicker, we're going to be going, I think everyone realizes, we're moving pretty fast, over the next months, getting architect on board, getting them up to speed. Like you said, here's everything that's already been done. Let them digest that and get into the project and get going. Anything else on timeline? Kind of blends into our next agenda item for old business item 4B, the funding article. So just an update. We were able to secure a vote at the town meeting last week, I believe it was, for approval of our funding article for $400,000. So we've got the additional funding we requested has been approved. So that's good news. It aligns with, onboarding the architect for, the funding that we've advertised. So outside of the previous conversations we already had regarding funding, is any other questions or comments? Hearing none. All right.
I think we're going to be surprised. I think that 400K is going to get us a little further than we think, just because of the previous work that's been done. And I'm not saying we're going to stick to these plans. Well, technically, we have some schematic design plans done, not very refined yet, they haven't been brought very far, but we have a preliminary site plan. Yeah, we have a preliminary site plan. We have a preliminary building layout. And even if we don't go with the architect that did those, there's no reason we can't say, hey, this is what we're thinking.
Mhm.
And then once they give us some good reason why we shouldn't go in that direction, that should give us a leg up on getting this thing going.
Yep.
And hopefully, I think you're right. We're going to have to ask for some money at some point.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we don't have to ask for a whole lot. And I also think once the architect's on board, we're going to have a better idea of what that number is, obviously,
Mhm.
which I didn't see it mentioned. But, when we get an architect on board, we're going to know what they expect to be paid for preliminary, for schematic design, all the way through, all phases of design and construction. So hopefully that'll help
Yeah. And
navigate that a little bit as well.
And part of it in the RFS, when we issued the RFS, we also advertised what the dollar amount would be too.
Yeah.
I mean, so with the OPM, there was no advertisement of a dollar amount. It was basically, we'd have a negotiation after. There was a discussion a couple meetings ago coming to what that number was and agreeing to that. So that way the architect's knowing who's bidding on it. Here's the budget we're asking you to do, and here's what we're asking you to do for that budget. So, I'm looking forward to, having the interviews with the architects to kind of see for that number, how much, they can get done and get them on board.
Is that preliminary work something that you want to send out to all the firms now, or is it something you'd rather hold and give it to them once they're on board?
I think I'd wait till we get to the three, right?
Correct.
I'd wait till we're down to the three, and then I think it's worth sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Let them know what we're thinking.
Yep.
And this is just a question I think you're probably best suited to answer. You're comfortable with that, knowing that one of those three, in all likelihood, may be the same group that generated those preliminaries?
I actually think that's advantageous. These gentlemen will tell you, that's not unusual, especially working with a town that's done repeat work with architects. Sometimes that's the situation. I worked for a school firm and we would tend to get repeat work. And even though we had to go through the whole process, we were already kind of going through that process ahead of time. People were doing the feasibility study, so it's really not too unusual for that to happen in public work.
Yeah.
In private work, it'd be very unusual. Yeah. You don't want to share anything.
I mean, just the public nature of this work, and it was paid for in public funds, so that information is available if they watch even some of the meeting minutes. Packaging it up and sending it to them, and I think you're right. Maybe you pick the top three that you like, and then provide them the information prior to their interviews, so they can see what you're getting at and tailor their interviews around.
Yeah, that's going to be part of it. As you were talking about, Scott, is just getting up to speed. The 5 years of work that we've done of how this is the one site that works for everything. Some of them might be on an MSBA process where they want to do site evaluation. They want to run around and look at the town to see if there's other stuff out there. And I'd like to focus them on this is the site we want to do.
There's also incentive for the outside firms to kind of outdo the firm they know provided this work.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
show them up,
either it be financially or we can do this better, and this is how we can do this better. So it's nice to have a little competition, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And we're the only state in 50 states that does it this way, right? Mike, am I wrong?
I didn't know.
The whole thing, yeah. Other states just don't do it that way.
Oh, I didn't.
It's unique to Massachusetts. The other part, Mike, they might do it that way. File subbids, we're the only state that does it that way.
Yep.
Mike, thank you for not letting anybody leave last Monday night, so we got through.
Yeah, that was close.
It was a little surprising.
So there was for those of you who weren't familiar, a town meeting on the second night. So the town meeting was a Monday night. They couldn't do it the following night, so it was a week later on a Monday. After some articles were heard, there was a motion to dissolve the meeting, which means basically they're not hearing any more articles. They're closing the meeting. It goes out. Mike was kind enough to make a friendly amendment to that to get committee funding article on there. So about 10 o'clock, I had to run down to the podium, jump up, give the presentation. After that, the meeting dissolved. So, yeah. So it was interesting.
Well, that was a select decision to
Yeah,
forward with those two items.
right.
Because both of them financial, one was the reserve fund transfer, and this was the second one. So these are the only ones that the select board thought were time sensitive. Given that dissolution is imminent.
Yeah. Right. Anything else on funding articles or anything there? All right. All right. Whole business item 4C. And just double checking, Sean, is there any other school building committee members in the attendees? Just Aqua or Selena?
Aqua's on.
Okay. And if you can promote him to panelist, just so he can speak.
Joe, Modern.
But yeah, he's not on the.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
Aqua's
Aqua's been promoted.
all right, just give it a second, make sure I'm here.
Thank you for the promotion.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Aqua.
That's
Any,
okay.
any comments on the previous agenda items that you weren't able to speak to because you weren't a panelist?
Nothing that adds value. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Thank you. All right, so item 4C, and again, I'm doing a hand agenda on here because my computer died. Yeah, if you could just pull it up just so I can see. Sorry.
I have.
Talking about the land swap. So,
I was very impressed.
oh, yeah, did it all from memory. So for the land swap work right now, perfect. Yeah, possible vote too. The alternative analysis I sent out to everybody earlier today. That basically, the alternative analysis was sent out beginning of September, and basically got comments back, got yours, Scott, and ran through, incorporated all those and added the appendices that were missing from the executive summary up front and stuff like that. So essentially for the land swap, as Senator Timothy mentioned earlier, there's certain components that have to accompany the special legislation. Alternative analysis is one of them. Appraisals is the other one. So with the alternatives analysis, our committee basically has to review it and come to a decision or vote to approve it. And then once we vote to approve it, we'll have it approved. I'm not sure if the select board would need to approve it. If they do,
Yeah, I don't know.
if it wouldn't hurt.
No, it wouldn't hurt.
Okay. So with, just focusing on not the appraisals right now, but the alternative analysis, just see if anybody had any additional comments or edits they saw fit for it.
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah. Definitely. So for the alternative analysis that was sent out earlier today,
At 3 o'clock. Yep.
yeah, that was, similar to the one that was sent out before, just with the updates to it and the appendices. Basically just seeing if anybody has any comments or questions in addition to that. So basically something I may have missed or something.
I would just ask that it be spell checked.
Okay.
I think in the conclusion, there's a error. So just to thoroughly do the whole document.
Yep. But in regards to content or anything like that.
No, I thought it was great.
Okay. Any other? Okay. So in the absence of that, it's basically just needs a motion to get approved.
So I'll make a motion to approve the alternative analysis and to recommend that the select board approve it as well.
I'll second.
I'll second that motion.
Right, Scott beat you to it, Mark.
It's not the way.
Yeah, no, well, actually, I'll get it done. Sorry, good point. Now that it's been moved and seconded, just see if there's, again, any other commentary or discussion before we head to a vote. Seeing none. All right, so we'll do a roll call vote just based on attendees. Scott Tereschak.
Yes.
Mike Zulus.
Yes.
Tim Lombard.
Yes.
Carrie Hurley.
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman.
Yes.
Mark Loring. You're on mute, Mark, maybe. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Akbar Bung
Yes.
and Sean O'Rourke, yes. And Dr. Miranda is not online, right? Just making sure. Yep. Yep. All right. The other portion that came with that is we got the appraisals, which are the other component of that. And I sent that out late today to everybody. So we can dive into that in another meeting. We kind of had time to look through it. The short of it is the financial analysis of the land that we're taking out as composed to the land we're putting back in shows the valuation of that is higher. So we're
Evaluation of what we're putting in is higher. Yes.
correct.
Yes.
Correct. So there was, they've worked on that for the past couple of months, and we just got it last week. So I apologize for not sending it last week and sending it today, but that's not something we have to vote on or anything. So, and I wouldn't have asked for a vote on the alternative analysis, but we saw that probably a couple of months ago. It was just kind of minor edits and cleanup stuff that we're doing on there, along with spell check I'll do before I send it. So they're just announcing that for everybody, just for, consumption purposes, to take a look at that.
7 figures higher.
Mhm. Any other questions in regards to requirements for the land swap, or anything that, Senator Hamilton talked about earlier that we need to touch on?
Any concerns with the appraisals? It sounds like it was a good result as far as ours, to support our submittal.
Yeah, there's a couple of nuances that they had in there for some of the items that they considered percentages of the lot buildable, and they had percentages in there that were not as high as I thought on that we looked at that we think are more buildable, but not by much.
Okay.
And if anything, it would just swing it more in the positive direction. But even with the conservative numbers they gave, the valuations of parcels that are landlocked on the Randolph Ave, those upper parcels that we put in there, those had a low valuation dollar-wise for it. So, it kind of worked out for what I was thinking, or at least the way when the cost analysis came up in town meeting last year, when we were doing the analysis on there, just taking some of the parcels that are up there, their valuation was lower. Anything else? All right. Item 4E, discussion update from MSBA. So I'm sure you guys all saw the announcement last week from MSBA that Milton was not selected for invitation to their program. So, with that, it's, we'll have to make a decision over the next couple of months. We'll have to, if still want to participate in it, I think it would be safe to submit again to rehash out the statement of interest, bring it back around and resubmit it next year, just so we're in the program again, just to try one more time. But I honestly leave that open for discussion for
Question, it might sound silly.
Yeah.
We start the process like we're talking about. We can still go and apply to get in the MSBA program, correct?
It's currently.
Oh, okay.
You start over.
Again, that was the next question. And as we've discussed before, even if we got MSBA funded now, they may make us repeat work we've already done.
Correct.
All right.
Sean, have you worked on a project where they had to start over again in that same manner?
I have not. I know there have been some schools that have built that they've asked for funding and they somehow got some funding from them afterwards. But I think if the documentation written, you have to go through their process. You have to start with it. So if you dig into it, I think you could certainly make a case that says, here's all what we've done, here's where we're at. We'd like for you to consider continuous of the project, but there's no guarantees that they would even consider it.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the work that we're doing up to this point is kind of following the MSBA modules. And so if we got accepted, even though they couldn't say, yeah, check all these boxes and you're ahead of the game, we'd have a really good head start going forward. For example, one of the first things they actually do is form a school building committee already there. Alternative analysis. So not the alternative analysis, but some of the stuff we've already done would definitely help move us along quicker.
Yeah, we're not run all our budgeting and all of our cost information the same way the MSBA runs it. So if there is a chance, everything will align with their own systems, and we'll run our own 3011s. We'll run all the kind of documentation they run as well. So we'll have that handy if we need it.
So any other questions regarding MSBA?
I had a question and raised my hand, and I'm sure you didn't see it in the previous section. I just wanted to be clear. Do we have anything outstanding with regards to getting the land swap approved by the government committee that needs to do the approval? Do we have anything that we've not prepared yet?
So for the land swap, we had Senator Timothy in earlier for public comment. So the special legislation that we need to file has been drafted, and we've been working with town council on that. The portions that have to accompany that special legislation are essentially the appraisals that I sent out earlier today, and then the alternative analysis that we just voted in. So once we have all that stuff, I think the commentary on the appraisals that town administrator had were minor, and we should have those by the end of next week. So essentially by the end of the year, I think we should have all the required documentation to submit. So if that answers your question, once we submit it, as Senator Timothy pointed out, there's a process by which it would go through to get approved. So just submitting it doesn't approve it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Item 4F, so the discussion update architectural services for Gile Road. So this is kind of, I think we touched on it a little bit at the beginning of the meeting when we were talking about timeline and stuff like that. And I appreciate, Chris, I appreciate you coming tonight too. We'll probably have a follow-up one on this too, just to go through. But so the formation of the subcommittee, what we were trying to do at the meeting, again, I think it was 2 meetings ago, was have the other 4 members that didn't participate in the OPM subcommittee participate in this. The only volunteer that volunteered was Mr. Hoffman, when Mr. Zulus couldn't do it.
To be on part of that.
I appreciate that. Yep. Perfect. So we have the 4 members of that, and we left 4 members of school committee. And let me just pull it up. There we go. I forgot. So it's middle school principal Bill Fish, preschool coordinator Burnett Butler, Cunningham principal John Redden, and then superintendent Dr. Peter Burrows. But Chris, he might have you fill in for him.
That might be a possibility.
Yeah, that's fine. We welcome it. You know what I mean? So out of the 8 people, 4 from school building committee, 4 from this district, they'll make up that subcommittee. All right, so I'll put an email together, Sean, so that will open up the door for communication with that group. So I think what will probably be good too is kind of have a kickoff meeting with them, just to, because some of them haven't done this before, and just to walk through the designer selection process and stuff like that.
I think it's helpful, and we can then set up our score sheet with with the intention, with everything they want in there, put it all up, and then we'll have it ready to go before we receive any of the RFPs submissions from the design team.
Yes, and I think the key thing is just making them aware of that weekend, the 12th, 13th, 14th, where we're getting these on Friday. Ideally, we'd like you to start reviewing them over the weekend and then have a meeting probably after that 16th or 17th, something like that. Any other questions, comments, anybody? All right. The only thing we have under new business is for the designer services for the RFS. We had to put an advertisement in the Milton Times. So we had an invoice that comes in for $260. So I think at some point we're going to have to formalize the process for approving invoices and stuff like that. Especially we'll be getting some from PMA once we get an architect on board. So there'll be one I'll talk with Nick and figure out from the town what's the proper process for all that. But for this one, it's in line for previous invoices that we got for things. So I would entertain a motion to approve it. And then once we get that, we can be done with that agenda item.
Second.
Any discussion?
It's a good deal.
Perfect.
I paid more than that to advertise my permission to get a front porch put in my house.
All right, so we'll make note of that when we make our presentation at town meeting for funding. All right, so perfect. So we'll do another roll call vote, and we'll start with Scott Jericho.
Yes.
Mike Zulus.
Yes.
Tim Lombard.
Yes.
Carrie Hurley.
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman.
Yes.
Mark Loring.
Yes.
Corey Bond.
Yes.
And Sean O'Rourke. Yes. All right. So item 6A for future meeting dates. I left that to be determined mainly because with the timeline that we were working on for onboarding the architect, I think that's going to drive some of it right now. So the good thing is I don't see a need to meet at any time between now and the end of the year. So I'm not sure, even with the subcommittee, I think the next meeting would probably be with the subcommittee meeting at sometime that second week of January. And then, the interviews we're having at the end of January. So I'll leave it open for people because I don't see much need to meet between now and the beginning of January.
Mark has his hand up.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sean, I think the only thing I was going to just jump in and advocate is that we put something in the calendar, even if it's just a standing meeting every other week, as we kind of, established back in August. And if we need to cancel because we don't have anything to talk about, I think everybody would appreciate. I know I would appreciate the time back, certainly, but just holding that in the calendar is really helpful for planning purposes.
Yep.
And if we want to start in the middle of January, I think that makes sense to me.
Okay. So,
Aqua also has his hand up.
yeah, Aqua, go ahead.
Sure, if when you discuss about meeting, if it covers the subcommittee entirely, or if that will be discussed separately, and how that would happen, would you be sending meeting invites, just the coordination part of that meeting? If you can touch on that, I would appreciate it.
No problem. The meetings for the subcommittee would be coordinated separately because it wouldn't require the entire school building committee. And there's not a quorum at that meeting of the school building committee because there's only 4 members. So that one, Sean will be coordinating that with the, call it subcommittee. But the overall school building committee, essentially, I think the point Mark was making is, do we want to just go on a every 2 weeks? I know previously we're doing every 3 weeks. I just open it to anybody's suggestions or anything like that.
It's kind of hard to predict for January and February with the RFP going out. I think they'll clash a lot. So
Yeah, I'm thinking of putting a hold in my calendar on the 22nd and just seeing what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, because if we aim for the 22nd, I mean, we could do it too. I'm just trying to think of how other committees meet. So the Conservation Commission, I think, meets once a month. And I think it's like the 3rd Tuesday of that month or something. So, for us, if we wanted to just say we want to meet once a month and additionally as needed, that lends itself to what Mark was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Mark has his hand up again.
Yeah, yep. Go ahead, Mark.
I would assume we might need, once we get the architect on board, that we might need a few more meetings, in the January or early February timeframe to get them really launched and fully on board and have whatever discussions they need to be able to kind of hit the ground running. Does that sound right to you? Does that feel? I worry once a month actually isn't going to be right if we schedule something on January 22nd, which again to me sounds like a good timeline for the next meeting. But then once we have the architect on, waiting another month before the next meeting feels like a long time. But what other people's thoughts on that?
My take on it, and that's kind of why I wanted to discuss it with everybody, is I feel at some point when we do get the architect on board that, having, after we get through the static friction of getting the process moving with them, holding a more scheduled meeting, but up to that point, I think we have to be agile with our scheduling, even though it might not be perfect for everybody, but, aiming for, the week of the 22nd of January, just have a meeting to prep for the interviews the following week, kind of see what's come out of that. Would be helpful. And then following that, the contract date is the first week of February. So maybe that following week after that, have that with the architect and the OPM, with us at the table. So if we want to kind of aim for those 2 dates right now, which would be the 22nd
And the 12th.
and the 12th.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Those are the Mondays.
Those are Mondays, yeah. It's the 12th of February. Is that school vacation at the President's the week after?
Yeah.
It's the week after.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, 19th is President's Day. So the 12th would be the week before.
That would be a good time.
Any comments online? Just see if anybody had their hand raised.
So hands raised, Scarlett.
Is there any check-in required for what needs to be submitted to Senator Timothy?
No. So with our approval of the alternative analysis, that was the only thing this committee had to do.
Okay.
Yeah. The town with the appraisals and our alternative analysis, the town council is actually filing that with the senator.
Okay, so
Yep.
I just
I appreciate
might
that.
need to acknowledge.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, for us, our timeline, the old one that I had land swap, OPM onboarding, and then architect onboarding. So that was the third component.
Where would be a good place to get the slideshow that you guys showed earlier, or
I'll put that on our file show site if that's all right. It's actually up there. If you still access that, but I'll email the link. I'll put the link to the committee after this, and
Thank you.
great. It'll be there. It'll just be under. It'll be dated tonight's meeting, and then all the information that we presented for tonight's meeting will be in that folder.
perfect? Thank you.
I think meetings were good. So item 7 is adjournment. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
As I said, want to hang out? Sure.
Seconded.
No. It's the delay. It's the delay again. All right. So roll call vote. Scott Tereschak.
Yes.
Mike Zulus.
Yes.
Tim Lombard.
Yes.
Carrie Hurley.
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman.
Yes.
Mark Loring. That delay. Thank you, sir. And then Akbar Bong
Yes.
and Sean O'Rourke. Yes. Thank you all. Have a good night.